Hello and welcome to HIP's live stream. This is Houston Indie Podcast Society. We're here April 20th. I know, let's go ahead and get the jokes out of the way first. So, okay, I am Jared, obviously. I'm here with Carrie. Ming
Hello, everyone.
is running a little bit late, but he should be joining us here pretty shortly. We're very excited to have a special guest with us this week. It is Mike Comite. He is a senior producer and engineer for Headgum, which is a podcast network that has a lot of great shows. Mike, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I'm
Thank you.
so to be here.
So I kind of wanted to focus on your role as a producer and an engineer with a network. I know that there's a lot of people out there who are interested in being a producer, trying to get in with a network, one of the bigger networks. What has been your experience so far with working with Headgum?
I started at Headgum, I want to say back in like 2016, just as like a freelancer, and was kind of just on tap here in New York for them as they were getting the studio on the East Coast going. And it was very much, whenever they needed me. And right around September 2019 or so, they're like, oh, it looks like we have the opportunity for a full-time job. And I had been working retail probably for like 7 years at that point. And I was like, yeah, I'm ready to get out of that. And
Haven't we all?
Yeah, I know.
At some point in our lives. Oh,
yeah. So yeah, it's a dream come true. Like I said, easy way to put it.
So what was the first podcast that you started working on for Headgum?
For Headgum, the first podcast they had me do, it was so lucky and actually very coincidental with what's going on tonight. The first thing I ever got to sit in on and work with was High and Mighty, which is John Gabers' podcast. They're doing actually a live stream in about a half an hour. So nobody abandoned this for that, but but yeah, they're High and Mighty's doing their thing tonight. But that was the first time I ever sat in on a podcast, and it was the most bizarre experience. I just walked into the New York studio at the time, and John was just right there. I hadn't met him before. I didn't know who he was. And the guy who was running the New York studio at the time was like, "Oh, Mike, this is John. John's Mike." And John was like, "Hey, I'm just going to go smoke really quick before we record." And I was like, "Oh, this is this kind of podcast. Okay, I understand now." And and so that was the first thing I ever did. The first show I ever actually got to like have a creative hand in, and creative is very loose in this situation, but like as far as like sonics and engineering and mixing and stuff like that was Black Men Can't Jump in Hollywood, which is no longer in the network, but that was the first show that they put me on.
That's
so welcome.
Pretty exciting.
I was going to say, yeah, it is very exciting. It's so cool that you get to do this for a living. So talk us through a normal day for you. What are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
It changes every day. There are like there's some regularity to it, but not a whole lot. Depending on the show that you're working on. So right now, my two main projects are Dead Eyes, the podcast, and the other podcast called Keeping Records. One is a show that is a weekly, every Friday we put it out. That's Keeping Records, and it's very conceptual, but also easy and fun, and just people talking like us and that kind of thing. Like you sit down and record it and it's done. And then it gets all handed to me. And then Dead Eyes is a show that is an intensely narrative, researched show, more like you'd hear on like a This American Life episode that's extended over the course of, many episodes. So we're off season with Dead Eyes right now. So my schedule is a lot easier. When Dead Eyes is in season, it's, and we're in crunch time, it's like, you wake up, you start working on an episode and you don't stop working until, 5 days later or something like that. You're just doing like, but yeah, nowadays you are either editing or you are mixing or you are recording, and recording is easy, just walking over to your computer right now and just jumping on a Zoom call.
So Dead Eyes is a very good show. I listened to Dead Eyes actually, and on the last episode, it's funny because you kind of got thrown into the role of like World War II historian, which is pretty funny.
It was insane. Yeah, that was one of the craziest things that ever happened. And while it was happening, I kind of knew that it was going to be crazy. And that's why I ended up on that episode. Like, if you talk to any of the hosts that I work with, my number one goal in doing any show is to make sure that nobody knows that I'm working on the show. That's like my ultimate goal, is to have my name never be spoken. I never want to have to be on mic or anything like that. There've been a couple of situations where I've had to, but I try not to make them happen at all. And when I have the power of editing, I can do that. Like when I'm recording Keeping Records and they're just like, Caleb and Shelby know I hate being called out, so they'll just start yelling at me and they'll be like, Mike, you're so great. I can't believe we're so, like, just something stupid, to make me feel awkward. But I have the power of editing behind me. And so I can just kind of cut that out if I don't like it. When it comes to Dead Eyes, though, that season finale episode, without spoiling anything, it just was, it took on a life of its own as far as what we were trying to make and what we ended up making. And I got so entrenched in the research I was doing on World War II and this one specific veteran in World War II. I didn't become like a scholar or anything, but that it was really hard to articulate the journey that I had been on without like going crazy. It was the only way to make the episode make sense was to have me kind of describe the steps I had taken.
Yeah, and if you haven't listened to it yet, then definitely go and listen. I would not start there. I would not start on the finale. Definitely,
I don't think it would make a whole lot of sense to start
probably
there.
not. Well, yeah. I don't know. It's a show about Band of Brothers, so
yeah.
Why don't you, for those who don't know, haven't listened, why don't you go ahead and explain the concept of Dead Eyes?
Whenever I get asked this question, I just have to think of the opening monologue. That's the same in every show. So it's like, the show is hosted by a comedian and an actor. His name is Connor Ratliff. 20 years ago, he got fired by Tom Hanks when he was cast in a small speaking role in Band of Brothers. He was fired for the reason that Tom Hanks saw his audition tape and said that he had dead eyes. That stuck with him, obviously, for 20 years now. And he's mostly over it, but he's not entirely over it, I guess. And
maybe not.
It's a point of contention in all the guests, and sometimes me too. How over it is he? I would say he has it completely under control, but there's always a degree of some rejection that's hard to get over, whether or not you've processed or not. It's like it kind of just sits there. It's like a thing. And so the show is basically an exploration into what actually happened in that situation, because Connor was never got to talk to Tom Hanks, obviously, about why he was fired. He just had a re-audition with the guy and everything seemed to be fine. And then he walked out of the room and was told he was let go. We're 20 episodes deep now into this mystery, and sometimes we take detours. Sometimes we actually talk to cast members from Band of Brothers. Sometimes we talk to people who were almost cast in Band of Brothers and similarly got ushered away. But yeah, it's a wild ride, and that's it.
So I know you guys have tried getting Tom Hanks on the show, right?
Yeah.
Has there been any kind of connection there, or is it just like complete silence?
I can't say exactly what's happened behind the scenes, but I will say that there's a very strong signs that he is aware of the podcast. I can say that we have put an official ask to him in the form of a typewritten note. That was last season. Connor he bought a typewriter off of eBay. It came and it was broken and he couldn't fix it. So he ordered a second typewriter off of eBay. Tom Hanks famously loves typewriters.
Oh, yeah.
And he made a nice typewritten note, addressed it, and sent it to Playtone and sent it in the mail. And, we don't know what came of it, but we will find out hopefully soon.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Because, I think that's just like the end-all be-all for that show, is to actually have Tom come on the show and kind of give not necessarily a reason, but like some kind of awareness to the show and some kind of explanation.
Yeah, I think it's really that Connor just wants to know if he remembers it and knows what his memories are, if he does, because there's a huge chance that Tom Hanks does not remember firing Connor at all. And I think it's a very good possibility that's the case. If it could just be a faint memory, it could be not even like one of I mean, as we go through in like episode 3 or something, it could just be something like one of 20 decisions he had to make that day, one of 500 decisions he had to make that day as a director of the episode of Band of Brothers. And maybe he's had to do that also firing somebody 100 times a year and, in that fashion. There's nothing cruel about it. There's nothing crazy. So the conversation would be very civil if it did happen. And yeah, I mean, as far as it being the be all end all of the whole thing, I think, Connor has some debate about that. I think the show does have the potential to live outside of what it is. Because I mean, if you listen to some of the episodes, don't have anything to do at all with Band of Brothers. It's more about like, just weird showbiz mysteries or other incidents from Connor's life. Like there's the season premiere from season 2 is Connor talking about how he got back into acting after taking a huge break from it after getting fired from Band of Brothers. So, nothing totally to do with Band of Brothers, but there's stuff to explore, I think.
Yeah, and
but it
that'd
would be nice
really
to
cool.
Home.
Yeah, I can only imagine that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, like I said, it's one of those things where I guess as an actor, and I am definitely not, but as an actor, I would assume that having a role like that, which was not a big role, but it's something that, could have put him on a different trajectory.
Right.
And, to get cut from something like that, I think you, as an actor, you would kind of want to know why and get some kind of feedback as to, I can do this better later on down the road.
I think if anything had been said to Connor that wasn't Tom Hanks thinks you have dead eyes, I think if anything was said to him besides that, it wouldn't be haunting him. But it was just such an odd thing to relay to someone. We do talk to the person that literally said those words to Connor in the show. I forget which episode, but it's in the 2nd season. We do talk to the human being that said that relayed Tom Hanks' message. But the question becomes, did Tom Hanks actually say that? And I think that's really what we want to know. And like I said a second ago, it's possible Tom Hanks did say that and doesn't remember. It is totally possible that he didn't say that at all, and that was just a fabrication of the casting directors. So it's I think that's the drive behind finding an answer. There's no I think I was so bummed out. Like a couple weeks ago, there was some blog, popular blog. I think I want to say I don't want to call them out because I don't know if I have the name right. I could look it up on Twitter later and show it to you guys, but a fairly popular blog was doing us a solid and saying that they liked the show, but they framed it in such a way that was like, he's out for revenge. And I was super bummed about that because it wasn't just like a small blog saying this thing or like somebody tweeting this. This was like a popular thing. Like a lot of people's first time seeing the show could be in this thing. Yeah. And they had said he's out for revenge and he wants an explanation. And I would say that Connor doesn't want, number one, he definitely doesn't want revenge. There's nothing to do with, there's no ill will towards Tom Hanks. He's a huge Tom Hanks fan. And as far as demanding an explanation, I think Connor would be totally fine with Tom Hanks just saying he doesn't remember it. And then he just want to talk to him about, failure in show business and stuff. So it's it's a weird driving force that motivates the podcast. It's an adoration and curiosity. Yeah.
You always hear about Tom Hanks being one of the nicest guys in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. So maybe that mystery, did he say it? Did he not say it? Yeah. Yeah.
I mejust I'd be so curious to know what actually, I as the producer of the show, I have to be curious. It's my job, but there's just my biggest fear is that Tom Hanks knows about the show and he thinks that he doesn't want to ruin our fun, because there's a whole idea that he knows if I go on the show, this could be the end of it or something like that, even though we don't want that. But he's like, if I go on the show, that kind of ends the show. So maybe I'll just let them do their thing for a while. And I'm like, no, please come on the show. Please, give us what we need for this,
It's a little bit of closure if he does come on the show, but it's also Tom Hanks on a podcast, and that, is interesting in itself.
It happens very infrequently. I can't even, I don't know. Has he done a podcast ever?
I don't know that he has.
I would think Conan's show would probably be something that he would appear on.
One of the bigger ones. Yeah,
I could see him like being one of like the tentpole guests for Mark Maron to get, just because like Maron got Obama, so who can he get at this point?
Right.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks is more difficult to get than Obama. You said it.
Yeah, he has this. I mean, Obama. It was something he had to do, and I feel like Tom Hanks should do the same thing.
Let's hope so. Let's hope that if he hasn't been on a podcast before, let's hope that Dead Eyes is the first one that he goes on.
Yeah. I always think it's weird when there are multiple celebrity podcasts where like people that are just dedicated to certain celebrities. There's infinity of them, but I always want Dead Eyes to exist outside of that sphere as like not like there's a new one called like Adam's Slander for Adam Sandler. It's like an Adam Sandler show about like weird encounters with him. There's that Tom Cruise one that exists now. And it's really just people talking about these celebrities in various forms of mystique and adoration. And like, I kind of want Dead Eyes to exist outside of that sphere of like it could be in the Venn diagram of that, like sort of intersecting with like the celebrity adoration. But I think it's more just about like the concept of failure and getting over something and how to.
Yeah. I mean, that's very good. And again, like if Tom Hanks never got on the show, then it would be a great show nonetheless, because I enjoy listening to it. And, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like who would be mostly interested in this show. And I think people who are fans of Band of Brothers, I think would find it interesting to get, some of the backstory of Band of Brothers and you guys talk to people who actually worked on the show. And I mean, just like you're saying, like it's a show about, overcoming failures. And
yeah. When people ask me, I usually say, like, if you're a fan of like Starley Kine's mystery show, if you're a fan of Heavyweight, Jonathan Goldstein's show, if you're a fan of Missing Richard Simmons, I think was the name of the show, Dan Taberski's show. It's just, there's it's a quest show, but it's a quest show that is like has a lot of side quests on that quest. It's an RPG with a lot of side quests.
At least it's not any quest where you have to like walk somebody to a quest.
Yeah, and luckily there's not a lot of Radiant quests either. So it's like you're not stuck doing the same thing over and over. Every episode is something different, I would say.
All right, so I guess let's kind of move on past Dead Eyes. Let's talk about some of your past podcasts, because you talked about Dead Eyes, you talked about keeping records, you talked about Black Man Can't Jump in Hollywood. Previously, you've worked on a lot of shows for Headgum too. Let's see, there's some of the ones that I've listened to for sure. Punch Up the Jam. I know that that one is no longer on the network. Unfortunately, that was a very good show.
Oh, yeah, it is a great show. Yeah. Punch Up the Jam is on a hiatus right now.
Okay.
Yeah, Miel stepped away from the show, but it exists.
It does still exist. Okay.
Yeah.
See, I kind of thought that once Miel kind of moved on past the show, I thought it, after going on hiatus, it was kind of just in that state of limbo and not really expected to come back. But if it's on hiatus, then hopefully it's there to come back, because I mean, really, in all honesty, that's a great show. It's
an amazing show. Like Demi and Miel had an amazing concept, and they executed it flawlessly, I think. And it's just like it's like the Tonight Show. I feel like it's like it's just something that can exist on its own, with the right people in the hot seat. And Demi and Miel were amazing.
I was fortunate enough to meet Demi at PodCon.
Yeah,
and talk about just like a very colorful person who is just fun to hang out with.
He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. One of the smartest comedians. Like he's just so funny. He's a great writer. Just super quick and super talented musically. Like everything is amazing about him.
Yeah.
So, as being a producer has never given you the bug to do your own show?
I started on my own shows actually. Yeah,
Oh.
before. Yeah, the reason. So the way I got involved with Headgum in the first place, I mentioned that I started as a freelancer. I started a Star Wars podcast when in like 2015 or so.
Nice.
Along with the rest of America, I started a Star Wars podcast, and it was with one of my good friends named Jacob Tender. He is like a super Star Wars fan, and he's up here in terms of Star Wars fans. I'm like down here, I'm like lukewarm. I love Star Wars. Like I know a lot about it.
No pun intended.
Yeah, he's like the type of fan he's like the type of fan that would go see the new the sequel trilogy in theaters like multiple times on opening night. He'd see the first showing at midnight and then see the next one he could at 2 a.m. or something. I was like, I'll wait.
That's devotion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that makes for a good pairing of a podcast. So I started that podcast with him in 2015 after he asked me to do it. And I got the bug, I guess you could say, just like I enjoyed editing and I enjoyed the sonic part of it. And I was like, well, I think this is something I want to do. So I'll just, start emailing people. And, you have the delusions of like, oh, I could work for 99% Invisible. I could work for This American Life. I'll apply to their internship or something with no experience. And obviously they're going to ignore you because you have no experience, which is, that's probably the right call in their place. But Headgum gave me a chance for some reason. They're the only people to email me back, when I was reaching out. But yeah, so I did start with my own show. And then Bantha Fodder branched off into another show called Podcasm, which is just like basically Bantha Fodder, but just me and Jacob talking about random stuff, kind of in the two dudes talking genre of podcast.
So are you more enjoying producing now instead of like doing your own? I think
I love them both equally. They're different hats to wear and different mindsets to get in.
Oh, yeah.
When I'm doing Bantha Fodder, it's like we tried to avoid being the news of the week Star Wars podcast. It was like, because there are so many shows that do a really good job at taking whatever's new in the Star Wars universe that week and talking about it, whether it's like a trailer, a book launch, a comic, TV show, whatever's going on. I kind of wanted to be more conceptual with it because I come from like listening to This American Life every week and loving Radio Lab and their deep dives. So that's the kind of podcast I wanted to make, not just. And so there are a lot of podcasts in the Star Wars. It's called Bantha Fodder, by the way. But yeah, there's a lot of episodes that we are just talking in, but then there's some that are just like more produced, like a Radio Lab segment where we're exploring somebody's, addiction to buying toys, Star Wars toys, and collecting things. And
that's the key word, addiction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then there's like another episode where a friend of mine recorded his daughter talking about all the different Sith Lords and which one is the most powerful. And so we just kind of did a scripted episode on that. We talked about that Elstree documentary where it talks about the people that were cast in Star Wars that didn't really get the chance to go do anything else beyond those movies, the first one at least. Doing that is just like, it's a complete immersion into like, okay, what's this show going to be out, researching it, this and that, how is it going to sound? And then when it comes to producing other people's shows, it's like more of an enhancement thing. Like I trust, like the fact that I'm working on somebody else's show means that somebody trusts them to create something hilarious or moving or whatever. And I see my role in those positions to like kind of take the clay they've given me and kind of like just enhance it just a little bit, and depending on the show, I might have to do a lot, I might have to do a little.
So real quick, something that you mentioned a little bit ago, you were talking about how you had no experience and you were applying to other places, and Headgum was the only one that really got back in touch with you. Why don't you talk a little bit about the process of what people can expect on having on their resume to try to go after a producer position with a bigger network?
I think it's like a lot of other things in life, whether it's like music or art or, it's difficult in media and arts because, you're kind of expected to do it because you love it. It's not like working in like I don't know. I don't actually know what stockbrokers do, but I imagine it's like, or like maybe being a doctor or something like that. Like you're expected to go to med school and you get out of med school and then you just go become a doctor somewhere or something like that. It's not that simple. But you know, when it comes to producing podcasts, it's like there's the podcasting schools that exist are not like podcasting schools like med school is for being a doctor. So you're not going to like, the thing is you really, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this. Cause I mean, the short answer is that there is no answer. You know, it's like, you should be doing it because you really love to do it first. But also being really critical of your own work at first, you know, and like trying to figure out, like trying to make it in the music industry. Like raw talent will take you very far, but at a certain point you need to start being very introspective and also looking out around you and seeing what the landscape is and seeing, well, what does the landscape need here? Or like, how can I change this? How can I fit into this? Knowing where to change and where to innovate. And that's where a lot of the beginnings come when you're trying to podcast, is like, you're trying to figure out where you fit in. And it's really, really hard to find a way into a network or something like that. But the best thing to do is what I do have some people that I talk to that are trying to do what I did. And the short answer is like, just getting to know people. And we live in an age now where you can tweet at me, you can tweet at you guys, and you can tweet at your favorite podcast host and maybe get a response out of them. You can DM them, you can hit them up on Instagram, you can, you know, ask them a question. Like, people are on tap. It's not like, you know, 15 years ago when if you wanted to get in a radio, you had to go be an intern at your local station. What are those anymore? You know, like, or you had to go beg for a job or something like that, like scrubbing toilets in the radio station or something. Like, it's not like that. You don't have to be a studio like intern anymore at like a music studio to, you know, get in. You can build your own, you can buy a Mac or a PC and build amazing music there.
Do the good work and you get good things.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, and certainly it's not the case in every case, but there is like a degree of being like, okay, like, how can I help the person that I like, or how can I communicate with people? Like, I have a friend who is really, she's a prolific podcaster, and she always, like, we're always talking about how to podcast. And, you know, now that I'm at a company that I get work at, like, we need freelancers sometimes, and I want to be able to help her and send her stuff when we get it available. And I'm always keeping an ear out. And that just came from literally one day, her just being like, hey, do you want to guest on my podcast? And I was like, of course I want to guest on your podcast, because it's fun, you know, to talk about, you know, Spider-Man or Star Wars or any of the MCU or whatever. Like, it's just fun. So like, I think it's like just asking this, this all goes back to your question, which is just like, how do you get a job at a network? And it's like, I honestly don't know. I got extremely lucky. But I also know that before I got extremely lucky, I was very much loving podcasting and trying to make a really good podcast first.
Right.
Do people come to you? Go ahead. Sorry, Jared. Go ahead.
I think that's the thing. Like, I mean, podcasting is still in its infancy for the most part.
It's weird to think about because it's been going on for so long. 15 years feels like a while.
Right.
But it's still young compared to TV, you know?
Oh, yeah. Right. When was your first podcast experience? What was that? What is like, okay, I want to do this.
Like, as far as hearing a podcast? I think the first time I knew that, like, this is an interesting medium to work in it has to be This American Life. It was like, I'd heard about it in college, but I hadn't listened to it. Like, a teacher it was a fiction writing class. And she was like, oh, well, like, you have to, here's an example of great storytelling on a weekly basis. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, but I just kind of ignored it. I logged Ira Glass's name, but I never really followed up on it. I saw quotes from him somewhere about, like, how to be good at art, you have to make a lot of bad art first, and then eventually you get good. It's like a famous quote of his. I totally butchered it, but that's the gist of it. And yeah, and then right as I graduated college, one of my music professors, I went to school for music composition, and one of my music professors was actually featured on an episode of This American Life, which got me listening to it. I was like, oh, I want to hear what Professor Holland is doing. And it was a really moving story about cancer research and music, and it was really, really intense. And I was like, this is a beautiful medium. And I think at that point I was like, this is something that I want to do. And so when Jacob asked me if I wanted to make a Star Wars podcast, I was like, yes, but only if we can do it like this. And so that's what we went for. But that, yeah, I guess This American Life was kind of.
So that was 2015 for you, with your first podcast that you started?
Yeah, 2015, I want to say. Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Jerry, when was your first podcast?
That I listened to or that I started?
Yeah, what was your first thing you listened to, and what was that first? And what was your very first show that you did? What year?
Probably the first show that I listened to was probably My Brother and Me. And that really got me into the idea of making podcasts. So the first one that I started was Hi Hungry I'm Dad. And that was in August of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You guys are such youngins, man.
Yeah,
because how long have you been doing it, Carrie? You've been doing it for quite a while.
Yeah, so the very first thing I started listening to were like Disney-based podcasts. And I was like, hey, I could take what I'm doing with my metal fanzine and all that and make an audio show out of it, which is what it was back in the day. And that was 2015. Or I'm sorry, 2005. So I've been doing it 16 years now.
Dang, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But nowhere near you, man. No, either of you guys. I met Kevin Smith one time, and I gave him my card, of course, as you would. And we talked about podcasting for a few minutes, and he's like, dude, how long have you been doing this? I was like, well, I started in 2005. He's like, man, if only I'm jealous of that. I'm like, if I could have like 1/10 of your audience, I'd be happy. I'll trade you.
That's something about podcasting, though. Like, if you have a pre-built audience for some other medium, it's a whole lot easier for you to make it in podcasting. And whenever I say make it, I mean like, obviously making it in podcasting is something different to everybody. Like some people feel like they may make it if they have 100 listens per month.
I will say that there's a limitation to that. Without saying names, there are shows we've experimented with in the past that we you'd think with the millions of listener or followers that this one individual had that it would have panned out to like a hit podcast, but it doesn't always pan out. I think there's a lot to say, about the way a show is put together, before like getting an audience and stuff.
Yeah. And whenever you say put together, you mean like format, topic, content itself.
Yeah. Sometimes it's totally luck though, which is like, I don't know. I don't like My Brother and Me. Like that show is legendary at this point, and it's just dudes talking, it's awesome.
Yeah. And look at what they built out of that.
Yeah. Like they wrote the book on podcasting at this point, literally.
Right. Yeah. So we didn't talk about all the shows that you were doing. So one of the ones that really got me into figuring out like who you were, Mike, is Goodwin.
Oh yeah.
Goodwin, in all honesty, like I'm a fan of stand-up comedy like a lot of other people are, and that is still going on, and it's still a very good show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm no longer on that show, but that was truly like a place for me to cut my teeth on as far as interview editing. And there's stuff I know now that I wish I knew back then, obviously, like in all situations in life. But yeah, that was a very, very like I was very blessed to get that show. Number one, because it allowed me to like kind of just show that I can do something, but also because like I got to be in rooms with comedians that I had no business being near. I feel like, like it's just, it was a really cool thing. But I will say that like, I produced about 50 episodes of that show. I want to say something like that. And I probably wasn't there for like half of those at least. A lot of them were recorded remotely. And I was living in San Francisco at one point. So like all the recordings were done without me for like a good chunk of like 20 or so. But yeah, it was really, really inspiring. Because again, like Jesse David Fox, the host of Good One, he strived to make an interview show that didn't feel like every other interview show. Because I mean, like Mark Maron's got the formula, Joe Rogan's got the formula. Jesse David Fox's formula is like very it's an interview with a really beautiful arc almost every single time. It was just it was really nice to sit in on them. Like there'd be just interviews where like the guests are in tears, and the guest and the host are just like slowly crying together, for whatever reason. Not often, but it would happen once or twice. And it was just like, I'd be sitting editing it, like not having been in the room and just being like, this is really sweet, I don't know. Yeah, but it was a good experience. And I was bummed to not be able to do the show anymore.
So I guess what could you say is something to focus on for people who are not just wanting to get in with a network to be a producer, but just producing their own shows? Like what do you think a focus should be on producing your own show?
On a live stream, this may be really hard for me to say because I'm super bad at talking and being not long-winded. But I would say the number one thing to focus on is like how to edit yourself and other people and kind of cut to the core of what's needed in a show or something like that. So, it's like that answer that I just gave was way too long. And like, if I was editing my answer, 20, like tomorrow, if you handed me my track and you looked at that answer, I would just be like, okay, cut all the stuff in the beginning he said about, being long-winded because we don't need him self-deprecating himself. Okay, let's move on to the next part there. And then I just zoom into the end and be like, okay, at the end he says, learn how to edit yourself. And I would just cut that and put it right there. So like just knowing exactly how you would edit a sentence and kind of being able to see stuff is what I would say is a really important thing to work on, and knowing, because that like you brought up Good One a second ago, that's where I learned how to do that stuff, which is, Jesse David Fox, like I told you, his interviews are prolific and he asks all the right questions, but he would, do a 2.5 hour, he would do a 3-hour interview with Gary Goldman, and the show is only supposed to be an hour and change, so like, how do you cut Gary Goldman down? And the answer,
Sure.
the answer to that is you don't, you just put out a 2.5 hour podcast episode and everybody will love it. And it'll become the number one downloaded episode for your show's feed. It'll be great. But when it comes down to it, like a lot of shows, including ones that I am on, can suffer from being too long. And with a lot of the Good One episodes that weren't Gary Goldman, it was like, well, what can we do to trim this 2-hour interview down to like an hour and 15? And that means you're having to cut, like a third of your show almost. It's crazy. And to think of that much stuff, because, if you're editing, a comedian down, almost everything a comedian says is pure gold when it's around.
Right.
That's like their job, to be funny and famous and hilarious and make everybody feel good about it or understand their craft if you're listening to Good One. And I think when it comes to cutting like a third of your podcast, it's really a case of that whole like kill your darling scenario, like that whole thing you have to do in writing and really any art form is just like saying like, oh, man, I really love this part, but like it's got to go. And case in point, like Dead Eyes is that to a T. Like, I talk about Good One, but like when I talk about like Connor's interview style is so he's an improv comic, so he knows how to keep going and to build off the last thing that was said. And it's so fun to listen to and so fun to watch. And, but, when it comes down to the editing booth, Good One is like, can be like an hour and change, but Dead Eyes really it excels at being a show that's like 45 minutes, maybe an hour if we have to push it or something like that. I prefer a good 38-minute mark podcast, but with Connor, he'll do like 3 hours of an interview and we only need 10 minutes from that interview. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? Like,
how do you with editing and knowing what to edit and what not to edit? How do you determine that? Do you reach out to the interviewers or to get advice, or is it just all of your own device and hopefully they don't get mad at you?
It's a stage thing, and it also depends on what your production cycle is like. So with Dead Eyes, right now we're in between seasons, but we're still producing full speed. Like we are doing interviews and I'm editing every day. So I did an interview today. I can't say who it was with, but like, I guess every day for the past week.
It was Tom Hanks. I can tell.
It wasn't Tom Hanks. Yeah. God, I wouldn't be able to not say it was Tom Hanks if I would. But yeah, no, it was, so every day for the past week, I've been taking an interview that's usually an hour and change and going into it and being like, all right, what is the bare bones of this thing to answer the question that we're trying to answer with this interview? So I'm present for most of the interviews now with Dead Eyes. There's very few now that I'm not there for. So I kind of know what's going into it. For something like Good One, it was very much like let's cut out all the dead space and the false starts and the rambly end of questions and just the basics. The ums and ands, when you total them up, they're nothing. Like you have an hour-long podcast, and if you cut out every silence that you can, like to make it acceptable.
Sure.
If you cut out every and and.
Where do you stand on that? Do you leave them in? Because it makes it feel more natural?
With a show like Dead Eyes, I have to take them out usually. My philosophy is, what does it add? Because you could have somebody who you ask them a question and they go they're like, and then they answer the question.
Jared, I'm going to need you to edit that out.
But yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, in this situation, that pause did nothing for my answer. But if you were asked me a really hard question and you wanted to know, and you wanted to illustrate to the listener that this is a really tough question that you answered, that pause has got to stay. I think sometimes vocal affects are fun. Like if you have a guest that says nifty, like every few minutes, it's like, how grating is it and how many can you get away with before somebody notices that you're making them sound unnatural or like, so where I stand on it is really, does it serve the show? And that's usually it doesn't. But again, it's also how much time do you have to make the show, because those things take time, like usually you want to keep your ratio of like, if you have an hour-long podcast, you probably don't want to spend more than 3 or 4 hours editing that podcast. And I know when I started with the Star Wars podcast, Bantha Fodder, like I was doing obscene hours. I was doing like 6 or 7 hours for an hour-long show or something like that. I was like, ridiculous. That sort of includes like pulling clips too. But you edit smarter, is kind of like the key, and kind of knowing when to exercise certain techniques and when to cut what is really with the Dead Eye stuff that I'm doing recently. It's like really, really just saying like, knowing the purpose of this interview is so important to knowing how to edit it. Because if I know I want to talk to, if I know the subject of the interview is X, then I know that anything not having to do with X is something that I can cut. And that's not to say there's nothing outside of X. That doesn't mean that Y and Z aren't fun and interesting. That just means Y and Z just need to be stuck onto a clip show or something like that, maybe later on in the season, which we did in season 2 of Dead Eyes. We just found a bunch of stories that just didn't fit into any other episodes and threw it into a clip show. It was fun.
Makes sense.
So I do want to bring this up. We do have Ming Chen here with us. Ming, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey guys, sorry for jumping in 45 minutes late. When you run a studio, sometimes you got clients who insist that. I have a couple other engineers here, but they're like, "Hey, you're gonna be." Anyways, long story, but I had to jump in and meet Mike for sure. So that was very important for today. So
yeah, well, we appreciate you joining in.
I appreciate you for letting me be the bad kid who shows up late.
Fashionably late.
Always,
that's what it is.
Always.
For sure.
So, Mike, I guess one of the things that I kind of wanted to focus on also is, what programs are you using? I know that there's a lot that are out there. A lot of people who are newer to podcasting uses like Audacity, stuff like that. There's Pro Tools if you want to spend the money on it. There's Adobe Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro, Audition. Jeez, what am I thinking?
I use Premiere.
Some people do.
Oh, you do use Premiere, don't you?
I do.
I use Audition. But I mean, there's a lot of programs. Which one are you using, Mike?
I use Logic Pro. That's what I'm editing in. The reason being purely that I was working at Apple when I started podcasting, and I got that I got a free coupon code for that, so that's how I got it. But yeah, I was using GarageBand before that. But yeah, Logic has always been my home. I had an interview back in like 2017, I want to say, for Howard Stern's show. Like, I live in New York City, so it's like, there's a lot of media jobs, and you go in, sometimes you get the interview. I don't know how, but like, so I interviewed for the Stern show to be like one of his back catalog editors, like who puts the clip shows together, like the rerun editors. And the guidelines for the interview said that you had to learn Pro Tools, and like you need a Pro Tools experience. And obviously you lie on your resume because that's just what you have to do. But so I said I had Pro Tools experience. I downloaded the free trial Pro Tools, and I taught myself Pro Tools and like enough to get by the interview in a week. Obviously I didn't get the job, so maybe I didn't learn it well enough, but I learned it well enough to produce the segment that they asked me to produce. So I have Pro Tools experience, and I kind of want to move Headgum towards that, just to be able to collaborate with outside sources. We have a collaboration now, which is called Celebrity Book Club. And that's produced by an outside party who then sends it to Headgum, not myself, but another producer at Headgum. And we mix that in Pro Tools just because that's their workflow. They record and they edit in Pro Tools. So we just want to make it easy for them. So basically learn everything if you can. But get whatever you can afford. Reaper is an amazing piece of software, and everyone should go download that. If you don't have a DAW and you need one, get Reaper.
I took an audio class for my film degree, and Reaper is what I learned on.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's $60 or something like that, like something insane. So that's my DAW. I spend a lot of time in Isotope RX, although I'm in a fight with them right now. They won't update RX7 for Big Sur yet, so I can't update my Mac. It's just stuck on Catalina still. I don't understand. I mean, I kind of understand, but I'm in a fight with them. It's all fight on my side.
I love that though. Fake it till you make it. If you got to download a trial, watch some YouTube videos and become an expert in a week. Do it.
Yeah.
It might pay off.
Yeah, I mean, like there are like master classes, or maybe not master classes. What's the other one? They sponsor a bunch of Headgum shows, and I really should, but maybe I shouldn't remember them because they're not paying for advertising space on this show, and they should. But yeah, there's classes you can learn everywhere in those organized ones. But yeah, I mean, YouTube has saved me so many times as far as like trying to learn a new technique. It's like, oh, I want to go for this sound. Like, I think part of that Howard Stern interview is like knowing. It was like, oh, you need to be able to know how to image, and I was like, what's imaging? And so I went on YouTube and just typed in how to image for radio. And I just found out radio imaging is just collaging sounds together to make like a spot or something like that. It's something I never would have known if I hadn't just looked it up on YouTube. But luckily enough, there was a guy there who'd show me how to produce a radio spot in Pro Tools, no less.
And it's free.
Yeah. And it's free with your internet connection.
Yeah. Well, so I guess what's the process of new shows coming onto the network? Because I mean, is there?
I think he's asking personally now.
No. I'm asking.
Listen, if you want to take this offline, we can do that.
I'm just interested. Like, are you, as a producer, coming in with new ideas and pitching new shows, or are there new shows that are coming to you and you get assigned to them, or what's the process there?
Two of the co-founders of Headgum are Jake and Amir, famous for being Jake and Amir, and okay. They are like the content developers. They're like the content outreach people. So they'll usually make meetings with people that they want to podcast with, or look into shows that they think that are independent that they might want to bring on the network. Usually there's like, if we're starting a new property or something like that, it'll stay in the house as much as it can. I mean, the short answer as to where I get involved in the process is usually after the pitch has happened and they say like, what can we do for this? Like I'll say, Keeping Records. That's a show that we brought on in January with Caleb Heron and Shelby Wolstein. Two amazingly brilliant comedians. And the show is a concept about NASA's Voyager records, the golden records that got put and sent off into outer space, that had like a bunch of music and art and everything on there. And what their concept for the podcast is like, if you had to make a golden record, what would you put on yours? And it's such a broad question, and the people who come on the show don't really, they're like, how do I answer this? Do I say like what I would put on it? Or do I think what are the aliens? And then we're just like, whatever you want. If you want to put a feeling on there, a smell on there, an image, a song, like an experience you had, do it. And so they came to Headgum with that pitch, and they were like, oh, so like this is what we have for an idea for the show. And I heard it and I was like, oh, this sounds really interesting. Like, because it gives you a lot of opportunities for media, like mixed media and like sound design. One of the first things that happened on the show was the guest said that they wanted to put on their golden record eating chips and dip with friends outside. So like, okay, I guess we're going to talk about that. But I thought it was way more fun. I was like, well, what if we sound design that out? And like, what if I got audio from freesound.org and put it in the background and then just had people talking in the other side and just like put chips rustling over here and like a whatever.
Sounds like ASMR.
It is. I mean, I love ASMR. So like, I'm not going to knock it or make fun of it. I love it. But yeah, it is very much like a thing that I saw the pitch and I was like, this is something I definitely want to be involved in because it's so different from everything else I hear. There's an episode where someone said that they wanted to listen to like a cassette tape or something in a car while driving. And so I just took the entire show, everybody's audio in the show, and put a reverb bus on it and made it sound like they were in a car. I took like sounds and sound designed the inside of a car and then just EQ'd everything to make it sound like they're just sitting in a car talking while music was playing on the stereo. And it was like, so when I heard that pitch, that was like, that's where I came in. And it was like, okay, well, here's what I can add to the show if you want me to sound design this out. As far as content goes, with like a show like Dead Eyes, that is really just, Dead Eyes was originally piloted with Earwolf. They did a pilot in May of 2019, I want to say, somewhere around then, sometime in 2019. And then they came to Headgum in fall of 2019, later that year, I want to say. And then we kicked off their first season, like with episode 2, starting with Headgum in January of 2020. And with that, it was like Connor came with a bunch of ideas, but the execution was up to me and the other producer, Harry Nelson, in that situation. So with a show like Dead Eyes, I have a lot more say in how the content of the show. But the pitch is all Connor, obviously, because it's his life experience.
Yeah. Oh. That's very cool.
Yeah.
So we're getting pretty close to an hour. Mike, we don't want to keep you too long.
Yeah, I'm here all day.
You got a podcast to edit, man.
Yeah.
Luckily, when Dead Eyes is in the off season, then I luckily can keep the regular business hours. When Dead Eyes is on the on season, that's when it's like,
yeah,
I gotta go. But yeah, I'm yours as long as you have me, you guys.
Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on and talking about your experiences, your podcast that you're working on, and Headgum in general. Let's talk about a little bit of outside of podcasting. You are also a musician. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. I play under the moniker Old Best Friend, and when I say play, it's like I haven't put out an album since like 2019, but and I haven't played a show for even longer before then. But yeah, I write music under the moniker Old Best Friend. It's something I've been doing since I was 13, and it was just it's like I started in like a crappy pop punk band when I was 13, and then just kept doing it for some reason. But yeah, that's what I do. It's like if I had to describe it, people say it sounds like The Weaker Than and Pedro the Lion, and just a bunch of sad emo, I guess, a bunch of sad indie rock, I guess, is the genre.
Well, were you producing your own stuff, or were you having somebody else record and edit your music? Or
yeah, that's all. This person I record with up in Syracuse, New York, his name's Steve Sobchak, and he is an amazing producer. He runs this place called the Square Studio. And yeah, I went to him for my last 2 albums, and produced with him. I usually come to the process with like pretty fleshed out demos and ideas of how I want songs to sound, but he makes it sound good. Like it actually sounds like music after he's touched it.
If people are interested, where can they find your music?
obf.wtf.
We do have this that we can pull up for everybody. So
There you
this
go.
is Mike's and Deadeye Podcast. You can find them on Twitter, and you can find his music here at this link.
Thanks.
So
Great. It's a great URL.
I know. I got tipped off to the .wtf. A friend of mine does a newsletter, and she has her newsletter .wtf, and I was like, is that what I think it is? That is a domain. Like, huh? Let me see what I can get for that. And it's pretty inexpensive domain, and it's pretty good with my band's moniker. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you kind of want to just give advice to some people, or any podcasting advice whatsoever? Like, what do you think the trends might be in podcasting?
Oh, I usually like to take this opportunity to say gear doesn't matter. I think it's always important to anybody who's listening to any podcast or any point for the podcast to be like, don't care about what mics you use. Like it's just, it's fun. Being a gearhead is amazing. And like, the people I know that run studios, it's very important to like have the right gear that's going to bring in the right customer base. And I definitely know that the right tools for the job will get the job done. But I think at the same time, it's like, this is a microphone that I was very lucky to get as a bonus for a job I did. And this is a $400 microphone, and I know it's overkill. I take Zoom calls with this thing and I look like a jerk. But like, it's true. But like, yeah, I mean, are you using a Samsung Q2U?
This is the Audio Technica
2100X.
Yeah. And I just needed, because I had to rush over here and
That's a great mic.
Just hook up a USB mic. It's $79. And,
Yeah.
For anyone who needs a quick home setup, this is the one I recommend.
Absolutely.
Won't break the bank. This is like 5 cups of Starbucks venti lattes, so
that's the thing, is that like I produce podcasts with, and everybody uses that mic. I've recommended that mic to every single one of my podcasters during the pandemic. After the studios got shut down, it was just like, oh, well, we need to have a solution for every podcaster to use it. And it's an amazing mic. And it like, your content is going to be so much more important than the gear you use. It's just, so that would be something that I always like to talk about, is like, don't obsess too much, like care about it. And if there's something you want, buy it for sure if you can afford it. But like, don't feel like you need to have certain gear to be good at what you're doing. Because if you have a really great idea and you're you're executing it right, then it'll sound great no matter how you do it.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of great gear out there.
For sure. Oh, it's so fun to obsess over gear. I watch all the Podcastage videos. I watch all the Booth Junkie videos. Like, they're like my favorite channels, and like I watch them all like as soon as they post. And it's you start drooling over microphones. But like, I think there was a person in the Headgum chat, in the Headgum Discord recently, who asked for mic advice, and for a friend. They're like asking for a friend, not for me. They have a budget of $1,000. What mic should they buy? And I was like, oh, buy a $150 mic and and spend the other $850 on room treatment. Like get some sound panels up wherever you're going to record, or like buy a nicer interface, or just buy any interface. Like with $1,000, you could build a home studio, and start charging people to come in and record in it if you wanted to. Like, so yeah, I just say,
and then you have extra money.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I say. Like, take the $850 you'll have left over after you buy in a $150 mic, and then just invest that into something wise, and you'll be happier for it in the end.
Or if you want, promote.
Yeah, exactly.
Use that money to promote.
Exactly. Buy some Facebook ads, buy some Overcast ads, something like that. It's just a much better move in the long run than spending it on gear. There's a time and a place to buy gear, and everybody will hit that point at different points. And I mean, I would say the people that probably should be the most concerned about gear aren't, and they're not suffering for it. So, that just says something, I think.
Yeah. I think it comes down to content.
Yeah, for sure.
If somebody is able to hear what you're saying and your content's good, then I think you'll be at least somewhat successful.
Yeah, that was a thing with like a Deadeyes. With the entire first season and part of the second season, Connor was using the Meteor mic. It's a Samson Meteor mic. It looks like it's like an old silver looking thing. Crazy amounts of noise plugged into a crappy USB hub, and Connor would send me his voiceover tracks week over week, and it would just be massive amounts of noise coming through. And you have to dock it up with isotope, but it's like people love Deadeyes regardless, and nobody really complained about it. So I have to assume that a $99 USB mic is as good as a Neumann U87 in some cases.
In some cases, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, maybe not NPR, but I don't know.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to go ahead and cut it there. Mike, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was so much fun to have you on.
Yes,
hopefully
sir.
we can have you on again sometime in the future.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Okay, so I guess thanks for hanging out with us tonight, everybody. Make sure you follow us on social media platforms at HIPS HTX. You can also follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube. You can find that at bit.ly/h. Sorry, bit.ly/HIPS HTXYT. Click the notification bell, and you can get updated whenever we have more videos. Send us an email at hipshtx@gmail.com. Let us know who you want us to have on the show, and hopefully we can get them. Maybe we'll have Tom Hanks come on at some point.
You guys probably have a better shot at getting him before me. So.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for tonight.
Thank you,
Carrie,
everyone.
Ming, thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.